Welcome to the NewsX World Newsroom. I'm Asima Katauka, and let's look at the top 5 stories of today. First, we're starting this hour with Ghislaine Maxwell's refusal to... Now, Ghislaine Maxwell has declined to answer any questions during a closed-door virtual deposition with the House Oversight Committee on Monday, repeatedly invoking her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination as lawmakers pressed her about Jeffrey Epstein and possible accomplices. Maxwell was convicted in 2021 of helping Epstein recruit, groom, and abuse underage girls over a period of years. Epstein has died by suicide in a New York jail in 2019 while awaiting the trial. Maxwell, who is serving a 20-year federal prison sentence for sex trafficking offenses connected to Epstein, appeared remotely from a minimum security prison in Texas. Her refusal to testify had been widely anticipated, given that she has a legal petition pending in federal court seeking to overturn her conviction or reduce her sentence. House Oversight Chairman James Corner confirmed Maxwell's stance afterwards, telling reporters, as expected, Ghislaine Maxwell took the Fifth and refused to answer any questions. Now, we welcome my colleague Meher Khurana for this. Meher, what more information can you share with us on this latest news from Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell?
Well, yes, Asima, we have been tracking developments regarding this news very closely, where each and every day new developments take place and people, including billionaires, high-profile names, are being linked to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Well, today her associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, she went on to a closed-door appearance where she used her Fifth Amendment right, and she declined to answer any of the questions that have been asked to her. Now, this comes as Maxwell obviously faces increasing legal challenges related to her role in Epstein's sex trafficking operations that were taking place earlier. Now, Maxwell has refused to testify and has raised serious questions about her involvement in the crimes that Epstein did. Now, Maxwell was convicted in the year 2021 for her role in recruiting and grooming young girls for Epstein, and is now embroiled in multiple legal proceedings, including civil lawsuits from Epstein's victims. Now, her decision to invoke the Fifth Amendment prevents her from offering any testimony in court that could incriminate her, which has added a layer of complexity in the ongoing litigation around this Epstein's network. Now, just recently, we had a press briefing from Virginia Giuffre's brother and her relatives. Now, she was one of the most vocal survivors of Epstein's abuse, but in 2025, she committed suicide. Now, she has constantly spoken out against Maxwell as well, and her brother took to the press today just recently, and her brother has had a long advocate for his sister and other survivors as well, and he has expressed his anger over Maxwell's latest attempt to avoid serving out her full sentence. Now, in a statement, he condemned the idea of Maxwell being granted clemency and accused her of trying to manipulate the justice system for her own benefit. Now, he emphasized that she would serve her full sentence and that offering her clemency would be a slap in the face for survivors like Virginia Giuffre, whose brother's comments I'm just reading out. Now, turning our attention to Europe, a lot of developments have taken place from there as well, and we have seen growing calls from victims and lawmakers for more transparency surrounding the Epstein files. The European Parliament has called for further investigations into the individuals connected to Epstein. Now, if we shift our focus to the United Kingdom in specific, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer's also facing mounting pressure within his own party. And the situation has escalated as senior Labour figures, including Anas Sarwar, have openly called for Starmer's resignation. And this obviously comes after the appointment of Peter Mandelson as the ambassador to United States. Now, despite these calls, Starmer has remained firm, and he's described his cabinet as strong and united during his recent public statements today. But behind the scenes, the pressure continues to grow, with several ministers expressing doubts about Starmer's leadership. Now, amid these tensions, Starmer has reiterated that his commitment to leading Labour and emphasized that the party is focused on its priorities. Now, shifting our focus to the United States, the Justice Department is also under increasing pressure to release more information about the Epstein files. Now, lawmakers and prominent figures, including representatives like Ro Khanna, have criticized the Justice Department for what they described as overly cautious handling of these files. Now, the public outcry has been particularly loud regarding the redactions that have been made by the US Department of Justice, with critics accusing authorities of protecting powerful figures. Now, if we recall that earlier the Justice Department also faced scrutiny over mentioning the names of victims, and then they had to take back a lot of the files that they had released earlier. Apart from that, we recently got some comments coming in from US Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick, who is also facing questions regarding his past interactions with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Lutnick denied having a close relationship with Epstein, claiming that he only had about 10 emails over a span of 14 years. And he's only met Epstein 3 times in these 14 years. Now, Lutnick explained that a one-time lunch with Epstein, where he was also there, while on a family vacation near Epstein's private island, was one meeting where he met Jeffrey Epstein. And he emphasized that family members were also present during that meeting, and he's called that meeting entirely appropriate. Now, despite his insistence, questions obviously linger, especially considering his role in the US government and obviously Trump's name being mentioned in the Epstein files numerous times. And the court documents have also revealed additional names linked to Epstein networks, and we obviously are tracking this news and updates as and when they come in, and we'll bring you the updates. Over to you, Asuma.
Thank you very much, Meher, for sharing that. Please stay with us as we come back to you. Now, moving the focus on to Middle East, the hotspot today is Iran and Oman. Iran's top security official has visited Oman on Tuesday for nuclear talks with the United States, likely addressing the next steps after initial indirect negotiations last week. The meeting involved exchanging written messages through Oman's foreign minister, though details remain murky about their origin and intended recipients. Iran maintains it must enrich uranium as military pressure mounts, with US forces positioned nearby and prepared to strike if ordered. A top Iranian security official traveled to Oman mid-Sultanate, now mediating talks between Tehran and Washington over the Islamic Republic's nuclear program. The visit by Ali Larijani, a former Iranian parliament speaker who now serves as the secretary to the country's Supreme National Security Council, likely focused on what comes next after the initial round of indirect talks held last week in Muscat with the Americans indirectly, while Larijani's entourage shared photos of him meeting with Omani Foreign Minister Badr al-Busaidi, the chief intermediary in the US-Iran talks, with what appeared to be a letter sheathed in plastic and sitting alongside the Omani diplomat. Iran has in the past communicated its positions in writing when dealing with the Americans, and famously, Japan's then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe tried to hand Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei a letter from Trump in 2019 that he refused to take. Iranian media has said Larijani would deliver an important message However, Iranian state television, hours after that meeting, described al-Busaidi as having handed over a letter to Larijani. It did not elaborate from where the letter came. Now, we also have reports that Larijani also met with Oman Sultan Haytham bin Tariq for nearly 3 hours. Neither Iran nor Oman has offered any details on what had been discussed in the meeting. Now we welcome Meher Khurana, my colleague. She'll tell us more about these talks. Meher, what more can you tell us share with us?
Well, Asma, obviously these developments come as last week the United States and Iran held closed-door conversations and indirect conversations in Muscat, Oman, where the negotiations, even though they were indirect, they ended up with a handshake. Now, we should not forget that these developments are taking place in wake of Israeli Prime Minister, I beg your pardon, Benjamin Netanyahu going to meet President Donald Trump at 11 a.m. local time tomorrow in the White House. Now, both the leaders are supposed to be discussing about the situation in Iran, and the tensions between Tehran and Washington obviously comes after the talks in Oman, where the envoys met with the Omani mediation. Now, officials on both sides had described those talks as a good start toward renewed diplomacy, but deep mistrust persists. These were comments coming in at that time. Now, Iran says that it's serious about negotiations, while Washington has emphasized the need for further engagement amid broader regional concerns that they have. Now, as you mentioned earlier today, and Iranian security advisor Ali Larijani was in Muscat, and he held meetings with Omani officials to continue discussions and keep the momentum alive. Now, this trip comes amid efforts to build trust and find a balanced and just agreement with the United States. Now, Iran has signaled that it wants negotiations to stay focused on the nuclear issue, and they've insisted that its program is peaceful and aligned with international norms, but it also continues to reject broader demands on missiles and regional policies as part of the talks. Now, the United States has repeatedly said that it wants substantive progress in these conversations. Now, officials including US Vice President J.D. Vance have made it clear that US President Donald Trump would ultimately set the red lines for these negotiations. Now, Washington has recently issued updated guidance for vessels in the Strait of Hormuz, and this is urging ships to avoid the Iranian territorial waters amid these tensions going on. Now, against this backdrop, as I mentioned earlier, we should not shift our focus from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's on his way to Washington and is going to meet US President Donald Trump. Now, officials say that the priority of this meeting is the broader agenda is the US-Iran dialogue. Now, Netanyahu is expected to urge Trump not to continue nuclear negotiations, but also to press Iran on limiting its ballistic missile program and curbing support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, which Israel views as an integral part of Iran's regional strategy. Now, Israeli officials described tomorrow's session, which is going to happen, as a strategy-shaping meeting, quote unquote, and not just a routine diplomatic update. Now, with possible scenarios on the table, should talks falter, including contingency planning for other options. Now, behind the scenes, deep divisions remain, and Iran is sensitive to demands that reach beyond nuclear issues, especially on missiles, while the US and Israel want a more comprehensive accord. Now, Iran's insistence on its rights to enrich uranium has been static and calls for sanctions relief while resisting broader concessions that continue to draw out these negotiations. Now, meanwhile, the US has maintained a significant naval presence, with the US Abraham Lincoln being in the waters out there, and Tehran has responded to such actions, and they've said that it could lead to a regional war. Over to you, Asim.
you very much, Meher Khurana, for sharing that. Please stay with us. Now let's move the focus on to Canada and states. As this year we have seen once again this hotspot move up. US President Donald Trump has surprised Canada today by issuing a statement. He has threatened to block the opening of a bridge connecting the US and Canada until Washington is, in his words, fully compensated for everything that it has given to its northern neighbor. Now, the Gordie Howe International Bridge is in the hotspot connecting the Canadian province of Ontario to the US state of Michigan, will not open until Ottawa treats the United States with the fairness and respect that US deserves, according to Trump, what he has wrote on his social media. The bridge is, first of all, funded by the Canadian government, but will be publicly owned by both Canada and US. Now, Prime Minister Mark Carney has said today that he had a positive conversation with Trump, reminding him Canada paid for the bridge. He has also said that it will be resolved after two men spoke Tuesday move-in. Now, Carney has said in French, the situation will be settled after he explained to Trump firstly that Canada did pay for what the Prime Minister said was the $4 billion construction cost of the Gordie Howe International Bridge that crosses to Detroit. And Carney said, secondly, he explained to Trump that it is a shared asset between Michigan and Canada. The ownership is shared between the state of Michigan and the government of Canada, and that US workers and steel went into the bridge as well as Canadian steel and labor. According to Carney, he has mentioned this to President Trump. While Carney has declined to go into other issues, he said the US President and he discussed, which were specific to the negotiations around whether to renew the Continental Free Trade Pact. Trump, in his Monday social media post, once again complained about Canada's deal with China, about Ontario having pulled US alcohol from its provincially controlled liquor stores, and about Canadian unfair trade practices in the dairy sector, according to President Trump. Now we move on and we welcome back my colleague Meher Khurana. Meher, thank you very much for staying with us. And what more can you tell us about US and Canada's spat?
Well, yes, Asuma, US President Donald Trump again took to his Truth Social platform and wrote about this bridge, and it's important to note that the Michigan-Ontario Bridge is the most critical infrastructural projects that have been linking US and Canada. Now, it's important to note that a lot of delays have been faced in this bridge by the US President Donald Trump's administration, and the fate of this multi-billion dollar project hangs in the balance. Now, first, a bit of a backdrop as to what this bridge is. Now, this is a project that is estimated at $4.736 billion US dollars, as reported by the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and it is intended to act as a vital economic artery connecting Detroit, Michigan with Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Now, it's been under construction for several years and was set to play a pivotal role in facilitating trade and transport across North of America. Now, but as of today, its opening is in jeopardy due to strong opposition from US President Donald Trump. Now, Trump has made it clear that he is not happy about the bridge's development, and he's threatened to block its opening unless the US owns at least half of this major infrastructural project. Now, in statements made earlier this week, Trump emphasized that the bridge, which connects Canadian and US sides, should have American ownership. Now, Trump's objections also stem from what he calls a failure of the project to incorporate American steel, accusing former US President Barack Obama of failing to insist on the use of US-made materials during the construction of this particular bridge. Now, Trump has gone so far as to suggest that Canada should not have unilateral control over both sides of this bridge. He claims that it is a matter of economic fairness for the United States. Now, this isn't just about the bridge itself. There's a larger economic and political struggle that is taking place behind Trump's objections. The US is Canada's largest trading partner, and disputes like this show the fragility of those relations under Trump's tenure. Now, his argument is clear that America should retain control over this project that serves both countries, especially given the heavy trade traffic that remains a point of contention between the two nations. Now, Trump has specifically pointed to tariffs on US dairy products and Canada's recent agreement with China, which he claims could have devastating effects on Canada itself. Now, these latest threats to the bridge are only the latest chapter in the long-standing trade disputes between Canada and the United States under Trump's administration. Now, under their administration, the two nations locked themselves on issues like the NAFTA renegotiations and tariffs on steel and aluminium. Now, the bridge, however, has brought up a new set of concerns regarding relations between both the nations, especially from US interests such as the Moron family, which owns the Ambassador Bridge, the neighboring older bridge that also connects Detroit to Windsor. Now, the Morons argued that building a new bridge would infringe on their exclusive ability to collect tolls, adding to the economic stakes in this issue. Now, on the Canadian side, Mark Carney responded to Trump's objections earlier, and Carney has dismissed the suggestion that US should own half of this new bridge. Now, Carney has also made it clear that the project was negotiated under the international law and had been approved and agreed upon by both the countries earlier. Now, in an interview, Carney has emphasized that the bridge is a mutually beneficial project for both the nations, and he further argued that undermining its completion would severely hurt trade between both the sides. Now, Carney said that he and Trump had a conversation on today about a range of topics, including this particular bridge, and the situation will be settled. These are words of Mark Carney. And he said that though he did not provide further details of this conversation with US President Donald Trump. Now, Carney has also addressed Trump's comments about US steel and disputed Trump's comments that the project didn't incorporate American materials. He noted that the cross-border trade remains essential for both the economies, pointing out that the bridge projects had been under construction for years, with significant input and cooperation from US as well as Canada. Now, Trump's statements also reflect political motivations back in the US as he continues to criticize former US President Barack Obama for not securing US interests during his tenure. And as tensions remain high on both the sides, US and Canada, we will be tracking this news and further updates regarding this bridge as and when they come. Over to you, Asuma.
Yes, Meher, thank you very much today for joining us and sharing the latest news insights on the top 4 stories. Now we move the focus on to France and India. An exciting news for Europe and India. French President Emmanuel Macron is to visit India from February 17th to 19th. He will also be attending AI Impact Summit in New Delhi. Now, next week, Macron is flying to India to take the AI baton from Paris to New Delhi, continuing the tech talks he co-chaired with Prime Minister Narendra Modi at last year's Global AI Summit. While India AI Impact Summit will be taking place from February 16th to 20th, the trip is designed to follow up on the achievement of last year's Artificial Intelligence Summit in Paris, which Macron co-hosted with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Now, the Ministry of External Affairs of India has stated that during the visit, both leaders will engage in discussions to strengthen bilateral cooperation across a broad range of areas outlined in the Horizon 2047 roadmap, while the India AI Impact Summit is expected to highlight the cutting-edge technological innovation, foster international partnerships, and chart the next steps in AI-driven growth. Once again, Macron's visit signals France's commitment to deepening Indo-French ties in technology. Now, another thing also in this will be allegedly the $39 billion deal for 114 Rafale jets nears clearance and boosts Make in India. This move is seen as boosting India-France defense ties ahead of Macron's visit. Now, India is set to seal one of the largest ever weapons patches, with the Defense Ministry of India likely to clear a deal worth about $39 billion, which is in Indian rupees, it's 3,500 billion Indian rupees this week, to buy 114 French-made Rafale fighter jets for the Indian Air Force multi-role fighter aircraft, also known as MRFA program. The clearance is expected days before French President Emmanuel Macron arrives in New Delhi in an official visit, underlining the strategic depth of India-France defense ties. Well, that's all for today's newsroom. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do